Today we'll be shocking equilibrium demand. So let's first take a look at our graph, get a little familiar. We have a vertical LRAS curve, long run aggregate supply, an upward sloping short run aggregate supply, downward sloping aggregate demand, and on the axis we have price level on the y and output or y on the x-axis. Now, before anything shifted, we see here we have a point where they all converge. We'll call this E1. Our E1 is our initial long run equilibrium. We can see that at the equilibrium we have a price level of 1 and an output of 1. Now, there's a lot of things that can shift aggregate demand, but today we'll be using the example of the government introducing a new tax credit for businesses. Now this will incentivize investment. So investment will go up, which will lead aggregate demand to increase. Now, how do we depict an increase in aggregate demand on the graph? Well, we're going to shift the entire aggregate demand curve to the right. Here we go. So at every output level, we also have more. At every output, we have a higher price level, and we see where we'll call this curve AD1. Now we see where AD1 and our short run aggregate supply meet. That will be our new equilibrium. We'll call it E2. This is our new short run equilibrium. Now, what can we notice about this new equilibrium? Well, let's draw our points out to the axes. We'll see that we have a new price level and a new output. Our price level, we'll call it PL2, and our output, we'll call it Y2. Now, what do we notice about this? We see that both price level and output are greater than our original price level and output. So PL2 and Y2 are both greater than PL1 and Y1, our original price level and output. So when aggregate demand increases in the short run, both price level and output increase. However, we're not done. In response to the increase in aggregate demand that we see here, the short run aggregate supply curve is going to shift down. So our SRAS curve is going to shift down, which is to the left. We're going to have a decrease in short run aggregate supply. So how do we depict this on the graph? Well, we're going to draw a line through where our new aggregate demand and long run aggregate supply meet. We'll call this new curve short run aggregate supply 1, or SRAS 1. This new point, we'll call it E3, where all the points converge. This is our new long run equilibrium. Now, what do we notice about these points? Well, let's see what we can find out. Draw this out to the y, draw this down to the x, and we see that price level has increased yet again. We'll call that price level 3, but output at y3 looks to be the same. So price level 3 is greater than price level 1, our original price level, but output 3, or Y3, is equal to output 1. So, in the long run, an increase in aggregate demand in the long run will lead to a higher price level. Price level will increase, but output will remain the same. It'll have no change. And this will be true for every positive demand shock. Let's move on to a negative demand shock. Let's look at our equilibrium point. We have E1 right here, price level 1, or Y1. E1 will be our initial long run equilibrium. This is before any of our curves have shifted, but let's take a look at our example. Let's say sales tax increases. What this is going to do is this is going to decrease consumption because prices are higher for every good, which is going to decrease aggregate demand. We're going to see a decrease in aggregate demand. How do we depict this on our graph? Well, aggregate demand is going to shift to the left, right here. We'll call this new curve AD1. Now, where aggregate demand 1 and short-run aggregate supply meet, this is our new equilibrium. We'll call it E2. E2 is our new short-run equilibrium. Now we see that price level and output have both decreased as well. Oops. Price level 2 and output 2. So when we get to E2, we see that price level 2 and Y2 are both less than our initial price level and output. Sorry about that. So when aggregate demand decreases in the short run, both price level and output decrease as well. However, we're not done. We're going to see that in response to this, our short run aggregate supply is going to increase, which is going to shift right. So our short run aggregate supply will shift right. It'll go through the long run aggregate supply and aggregate demand. We'll call this new curve SRAS1, and we'll see we have a new equilibrium once again, E3. E3 is our new long run equilibrium. What can we notice about E3? Well, let's check our price level and output. We'll see that price level, call it price level 3. Price level has gone down again, but output has increased to the point where initial output and new long run output are equal. So PL3 and Y3. So we'll see that PL3 is less than our original price level, PL1, but Y3 is equal to our original output, Y1. So when aggregate demand decreases in the long run, we notice that price level decreases, but output has no change. So, taking a look back, we can see that in the short run, if we have a positive increase in both of them, if we have a positive demand shock, both price level and output increase, and if we have a negative demand shock, price level and output decrease. However, in the long run, output suffers no change either way. But if it's a positive demand shock, price level will increase in the long run. And if it's a negative demand shock, price level will decrease in the long run.